Hello, this is Aaron Price, CEO of TechUnited New Jersey. This is our member AMA. And this week we have Meg and Michelle from the Ontario Trade and Investment Office. Really excited to have you both here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, Meg, can you introduce what the Trade Investment Office is and why people around New Jersey might be interested in getting to know you?
Yeah, sure. So Michelle and I work for the Ontario Trade and Investment Office. We're located in New York City, but our office doesn't just support New York, we support the Northeast market. So our office is really a part of this large network of offices from San Francisco all the way to Shanghai and Tokyo. And we all report into the government of Ontario's Ministry of Economic Development and Job Creation. So our main role there is to help U.S. companies expand into Ontario, and then also help Ontario companies export into our market, into our Northeast market. And all of these offices around the globe that I mentioned are, co-located with consulates and embassies around the world. And all of our services are complimentary and confidential to our clients.
Meaning that those who are looking to leave somewhere may want to be sensitive to the privacy of that conversation, and you can promise that.
Yes, of course.
Can you share with people, we're with TechUnited New Jersey, and so why, we think that there's a complementary relationship here. When and why should people consider Ontario?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Ontario geographically is actually very large. So it's larger than, say, like France and Spain combined, or if that doesn't mean much to you, maybe say it's larger than the state of Texas. So geographically, Ontario is big, and it has big things happening. So for instance, it's like the 7th largest economy in North America, and that's by GDP. Also, the top talent in Ontario is just skyrocketing. So most adults, I shouldn't say most, 69% of adults have a post-secondary degree in Ontario. So outside of that, we can also talk about like the friendly immigration system. Michelle, I don't know if you want to touch on that part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in addition to what Meg is saying, when you look at Ontario and Canada as a whole, the immigration sort of system program is extremely, open, welcoming, and friendly. There's just a myriad of options in terms of, if you, for example, were trying to immigrate to Canada or move to Canada, or if you, started your company in Canada, you want to bring your talent from the States to Canada, there's just so many options and ways that you can do that. Lots of programs that Canada offers on a federal level. So it's just that really open and welcoming immigration system that we have. And I think that draws a lot of companies to Ontario in the first place, which is important.
At what size of an organization, part of our mandate is to keep companies in New Jersey. So, when should companies, at what stage, when would there, what we talk a lot about is a differentiated advantage that we can help people have by being located here. So, and the reason we're excited to work with you is I think there's a complementary advantage they can have by being located elsewhere, but we hope that they don't just up and leave. But and when should they consider that it's they need another location, or they want to expand, and Ontario is the place for them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess when you're thinking about global expansion, market expansion, I mean, just to draw from, an example, most companies, when they start to look at Canada, they're at the point in their business where they're either getting new, clients in Canada. So there's, just interest from Canadian customers, or, from an internal business perspective, they're just wanting to, so, we've, kind of reached our sort of max in terms of getting situated in the US market. So we just want to grow further. So they would look to Canada perhaps as a next option, just because, I mean, obviously Canada and the US right above and below each other. So it's just easy access. And, Meg touched on just plenty of advantages that, that Ontario has and Canada offers. So yeah, I would say those are probably the main two reasons in just terms of getting new clients in Canada, and then also just perhaps outgrowing the business maybe in the US and then wanting to take it further to Canada. I don't know if Meg has anything to add to that, but.
Well, I mean, my question is, what types of companies, what industries do you tend to see make a move to Ontario?
Yeah, I would say a lot of our client discussions right now have been from life sciences. I would say a lot of AI technology companies, but and that's really mostly from probably like the virtual events that we've been attending have been geared towards those industries. So I think that just kind of makes sense. But there's really no limit on, what industry we're helping these companies. There's no, we're talking from startups to large corporations. So there's not a whole lot of set, rules on who we're helping. We're really here just to be, like a one-stop shop to clients.
How have you seen the pandemic change the people's interest in Ontario and Canada in general?
Yeah, so that's a kind of a great question. So Michelle and I are actually both fairly new in our roles. We both started in March. So we actually both started.
Good timing.
Yeah, I actually started working from home. So I've Michelle, I think, has been to the office maybe 2 or 3 times. So I don't really know how we can answer that because this is kind of all we know right now. So before this role, I was doing something pretty different. I was the director of marketing at a health and benefits company. So this is kind of all we know so far. So it's a lot of virtual events and planning for, hopefully a better world where we can be in person.
That would be a good thing. Are you finding that are people historically, based on the metrics of past years for the organization, are you seeing more people interested in leaving? Fewer organizations interested? Like, how are the metrics tracking? Even though I appreciate both of you are new to the org.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can share specifically, but how many companies were you successful in whatever the metric is, creating a deal with, creating an office for last year versus this year?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to answer that, certainly, because of, what's happened since March, there's obviously been sort of a slowdown, if you will, in terms of business development, right? Like, as Meg mentioned, we started in March. So around that time, that was when New York was literally at its worst. So there was definitely not much going on at all. But I would say, recently with these virtual events that we've been attending, these conferences, even like Propelify last week, we're just seeing a much more uptick, and it seems like business is sort of trying to get back on track. And it's a huge difference from March, just even a few months ago. So
yeah, I would say like the past few weeks have been, in my opinion, significantly more busy from when we just started. So, and I think that's probably, like Michelle said, we've been participating in more events, so naturally more leads. But yeah, I would agree with what you said.
How many days or really weeks and months before someone is considering a move or an expansion should they build a relationship with one or both of the two of you?
Yeah, I guess in terms of sort of timeline, it's a mixed bag, honestly, because sometimes we get companies who are just really fresh to, thinking about expanding to Canada. So they'll be in the extremely early stages of, I don't know anything about Canada, tell me more. Or it could be, companies who have already had experience expanding elsewhere and other countries, and now they're looking to Canada. But I mean, we try, like Meg said earlier, we try to be that one-stop shop. So it varies, I would say.
I do want to point out David Heifetz, who's with Prudential, mentioned he's asking, will participants in this webcast be sent some sort of amazing Ontario wine afterwards? We enjoyed a family trip to the region last summer. I didn't know Ontario was known for wine. What else is Ontario known for that people may not realize?
Well, I think Canada in general is known for their maple syrup. So I would say, I would say right now we have a lot of life sciences clients. So sometimes we rattle off things, like, the first pacemaker was created in Ontario, or like the discovery of insulin. So those are a few things that we kind of chat about with life science clients. Michelle, I don't know if you have any other ones that we kind of talk through a lot.
Yeah, I guess maybe in addition to that, just the father of AI being Geoffrey Hinton is now at the Vector Institute in Ontario. So that's a biggie in terms of just the development and recent commercialization of AI. So yeah, one of the main ones.
You sound a lot like me when I talk about New Jersey and talk about all the things that are invented here when we're trying to recruit people here. So don't steal away too many of our people. What about what do you see as the opportunity? Like, I used to run an e-commerce business, and we used to talk about the potential flow of goods across the border. Canada had a lot of benefits when we talked about basically bulk goods across the border to then go international. Are there certain other things? I mean, David talked about the wine. Like, certainly people know about the maple syrup. As a lifestyle goes, what are some other things that people may not realize about the Canada or the Ontario market in particular as a place to live?
Yeah, I would say the quality of life is something that Ontario has, and not just Ontario, but just a lot of cities with Ontario. They pride themselves on the quality of life. As far as more the business side, there's a lot of tax incentives as well that comes with that. In addition to like just work permits being something you can get done really fast in Ontario. So there's like the Global Skills Strategy Program, and that's where you can get work permits in like 10 days or less. And that's for highly skilled workers, like an engineer or developer.
Yeah, that is pretty impressive. I mean, what is do you happen to know the corporate tax rate, the average corporate tax rate?
Yeah, so the corporate tax rate is 26.5% right now in Ontario, which, I mean, and then when you compare that to, I guess, even in the US or just overall sort of just costs of doing business, it's significantly lower. And also one of the main highlights that Meg and I always try to touch on when we're talking to companies, in addition to that corporate tax rate, it's also, because of the way that the Canadian public health system is set up, employers in Canada, they'll be spending almost 30% less than they would in the US. So, I mean, just that alone, I think, speaks volumes in terms of what Ontario has to offer to a business who's looking to expand there.
And Michelle, you mentioned earlier other government programs and incentives. Can you highlight anything that people may not be aware of that the government offers?
Yep, absolutely. So I guess perhaps one of the main ones that Meg and I touch on when we're speaking to clients is the SHRED program. So it's essentially an incentive for R&D, any research and development work that a company does within Ontario. And depending on how your company in Ontario is set up, you could get just a significant amount of credits back and money back. And that can be used to or applied to any overhead costs, salaries, paying contractors, things like that. So that's a biggie in terms of R&D. And we try to stress that one to a lot of clients because, most of the people that we do talk to, they are doing R&D work on some level, right? It may not be, I guess, the most obvious R&D, right? But even like fintech companies that are doing any sort of development or research into their product they would definitely qualify. So that's one. And then, so that I mentioned, that's a federal program. So, and that's offered by the federal government. But then on top of that, Ontario, the province of Ontario, offers a lot of other sort of supplemental or top up incentives. So the Ontario R&D tax credit for doing R&D work. So there's just so many that, these companies can really take advantage of. And, we're here as a resource to those companies to try to get them, started on the application and connect them to the right people within the ministry to take advantage.
Yeah. What was something that surprised you, Meg, in getting involved with this organization? Being relatively new there. Like I sort of landed in the New Jersey part of my role by accident, and now I advocate for a lot of the New Jersey opportunities. What's something that you found to be surprising about, as you've been advocating for Ontario and Canada as a whole? What do people react to as like, oh, I didn't realize that, or something that surprised you about the organization or the country?
Yeah, that's a great question.
We can come back to it if you want, if you need a minute.
I think people are mostly surprised by like the tax incentives that Michelle just went through. Those aren't something that people typically know about. I would say we have a lot of introduction calls that turn into us having these discussions where, we end up sending them like a tailored PowerPoint or just trying to give them more information. And the tax incentives don't seem to be, why people are reaching out to us, which in turn is what they want to hear more about. So I really think people come to us with these introductory conversations that turn into so much more because we have all these incentives and programs, whether it's, your work permits or the tax incentives, talking through the different connections that we can help facilitate between our client and different partners. So yeah, I think there's a lot that's kind of that was surprising at first. I think it's kind of just, kind of going with the flow, and each client is really different, I would say.
Who do you compete with? Meaning, and not just compete with generally, but what other countries tend to show up in the mix when you're having significant conversation with someone where you may, Ireland stole them again. Like, who is the number 2 and 3, or who tends to be in the mix in these conversations? I mentioned Ireland because they're pretty aggressive in this way as well. But I'm just curious in general, what other countries tend to come up for the types of clients you're talking to?
Yeah, that's another good question. I guess Michelle might have a different answer, but I think that I would say it's not a different country. So Michelle and I support Ontario. So if anything, I would say sometimes we have clients who they're not sold on Ontario, and we, sometimes we have to bring in our federal counterparts over at the consulate. We're co-located with them, and they have trade commissioners that can help them, who really do, they have a different name, but they do really like very similar work that we do. So in my opinion, I would say if anything, it's not other countries. Sometimes it's people want to know about, Quebec, and, we're not here to talk about Quebec. We're here to talk about Ontario. So I would
These guys
say
are losers over there.
No. But I would just say,
I know you didn't say that.
It's not other countries, but I don't know, Michelle, maybe you feel differently, but
you're saying that people come to you they're thinking Canada, and now they're honing in on the area more so than where in the world literally should they go.
Right.
I think that the scenario I described, I think, has happened a lot more than the scenario that you have described, but that's just me.
Yeah. Michelle, I would agree. It's exactly what Meg said. It's not even, so I guess, sometimes the biggest struggle for us is hooking them in on Ontario, because Canada is so big, right? You have all these different provinces, and, each province has their own agency. They have their own incentives. They have their own different offerings. Some provinces have more of a strength in a certain industry. So sometimes it does make sense, to look at other places. But yeah, I think our biggest competition is hooking them in on our province specifically. I mean, in terms of other countries, honestly, I don't know if that's come up so far since we've started. I will say perhaps some companies that we've talked to, they've mentioned like Europe, but it's a very general blanket, statement. Yeah.
That's interesting. One of the things that when I talk about the New Jersey market is not, you both have very practical business reasons for people to relocate or consider expansion. For the context of this conversation, so I don't get in trouble with my board, let's talk about expansion versus relocation, because that would be bad if we lose all these New Jersey companies. But I talk here about the lifestyle, the proximity to New York, like some more of the personal lifestyle opportunities here. Is there anything you'd share? We had David talk about the wine country piece of this, but is there anything about the lifestyle itself that you try to sell the region on?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the lifestyle, it's similar, I guess, to what you were saying earlier about when you're trying to sell New Jersey. It's first off the close proximity. I mean, you can get from here to Canada driving or flying in, I mean, in no time, really no time. And it's like, wow, you're already in another country in like 2 hours or so, depending on where you're, coming from. So, and then as Meg mentioned earlier, I mean, the quality of life is something that we do try to sell. It's first and foremost, Canada is extremely diverse to begin with, right? In terms of just the people who are there, where people come from, the amount of languages that are spoken in the province is quite impressive. So that's definitely something that we try to talk about, just the diversity, the inclusion, and the community that Ontario and Canada as a whole offers. Yeah.
How was I'm curious, switching gears a little bit. We talked about the virtual world and networking digitally. How was your Propelify experience? I believe I saw both of you in the event at some point last week. I think it was a busy week for us. So forgive me if I got that wrong. We did okay?
I think virtual events too are getting, in my opinion, so much better with the platforms and having chat rooms for different sessions. I did miss Al Roker, though. I was really excited to hear him speak, and I missed it.
He was good. Fortunately for you, as a member of TechUnited New Jersey, you will have access to all the content that aired last week, so we can get you that video.
Great, I can't wait.
Very good. Michelle, how was your? I mean, honestly, my expectations were mixed, pretty low before going into this. Concerned that people wouldn't show up, that networking would be a significant challenge. That people, I do believe we're in this moment of we're not using Zoom for this, but Zoom fatigue. Mm-hmm. And I was thrilled. We had, I don't know if you saw our follow-up, we had 1.8 minutes of video viewed by over 5,000 people. People stayed for about an hour a day, which I was very pleased with. But I'm curious from your perspective, not just as members organization, but as somebody who's going to a lot of these things, what could organizations like ours do better?
I mean, well, first off, I mean, I thought it was really great. I mean, yeah, like Meg said, we've been going to, I've lost count how many virtual events that we've started, going to since we've, been in our roles. But I thought Propelify was great. It was easy to that, the chat function on the sidebar was that was great to, like I think Meg would just, introduce, yourself like, hi, I'm XYZ and my company is, whatever. So that was a great way to just get our name out there. And then, as people are just coming in, they can just see. And then, I mean, Meg and I have gotten a lot of emails and, just from companies that say, oh, hey, I saw your chat.
Well, we still have leads this week that we're talking to from your event. So yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. We have we invited in a DJ. I don't know if you saw it in the middle of the week, DJ Q Boogie, who was awesome. And she's like my new digital best friend. I'm glad you're dropping by to see some of these things. But we tried to make it fun and differentiate it a little bit. We obviously invested in the production quite a bit, but it's challenging. And I think especially conversations like this, digitally or virtually, and I don't mean this, what we're doing right here. I mean, as you try to recruit companies, this is very much a relationship business, right? Where you're meeting people, getting to know them, I'm assuming that in the past, you'd have actually gone to Ontario potentially with a client or a group. I would think it's a much harder environment for you to operate. So I'm glad that event was helpful. What are other ways that you think that the TechUnited New Jersey community, if they're not themselves interested at the moment in leaving or expanding, but what are other ways that they might think of engaging with each of the two of you?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess
who should they send your way?
Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes, in our business and our line of work and in this industry, it can be sometimes difficult engaging, what a company wants to do, right? We do look for, I guess, metrics or signals that would indicate that a company is potentially looking at expanding, not exactly, Canada, but just seeing that, they've raised Series E funding recently, and it says, they're going to be using that funding for global expansion, things like that. But I guess, I mean, it would
be good. Can we lean in on that a little bit? Because that's really interesting. Like you're talking about lead generation, and there's really, I wonder, are there really interesting digital signals that you can flag that, so that okay, this company's beyond just the fundraise, but are there other things that you can target around to see if companies are searching for expansion like that?
Well, I guess the number one thing would be the funding, and because that's made public, right? And there's a statement on that. But I guess in addition to that, just looking at the growth and following a company's sort of journey in terms of their employee size, have they grown, their employees from year to year? Have they decreased, or just looking at, has this company opened another office like in Europe or something? So, once we see that, that would sort of warrant a closer look at that company to do a little more digging and research and seeing if, another country like Canada would be on their radar. But I would say the easiest sort of ticker is that funding, just because it's public. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Any closing, I know you're both new to your organization, but we've been reimagining TechUnited New Jersey and how we deliver value to our membership. And I would love to hear from either of you, or maybe from both of you, what more we could do to make sure that this community, is valuable to you and to one another.
I guess I'll start. Sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle. You go ahead. Yeah, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, so I guess we've been members of TechUnited, I'd say maybe for a month now, so very, very recent. But so far, right, Propelify already participated in that, which was great. And like Meg said, we have so many leads that we haven't even gotten back to yet, which is great. But I guess our main reason for joining an organization like yours is to get more involved in our community, because we have, and Meg said in the beginning, we represent the Northeast market for Ontario. So it's a huge chunk, right, of the states, and it's a lot of ground to cover. So by having an organization and a resource like TechUnited, it just gives us an outlet and another channel of engaging with tech communities within our surrounding states. So I guess, that's definitely one of the reasons why we've joined. Bang, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah.
No, that was great. I think the event last week was really great. Like Michelle said, we've only been members for, about a little over a month, I think. So the first event that we attended was very well received on our end. So just with the amount of leads and the engagement that we had, the content that you guys had as well was just great. Unfortunately, I missed some of the speaking sessions, so I'm excited to get those recordings. But I would say more like networking sessions, more events that I think, some of us do get burned out of the continual, Teams, Zoom meetings and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, they're also really helpful, especially in our line of work, where this is really based on relationships and networking. So I would just say keep pushing those events and networking sessions. Those are really helpful for people like Michelle and I in our line of work. And we definitely appreciated the event last week. It was really great.
Yeah.
Good. I appreciate hearing that. I am wondering, as a follow-up, if we should, since wine seems to be a thing in Ontario, if maybe the Ontario Trade and Investment Office wants to host like a virtual wine tasting, sponsor like a small group for that, and send bottles of wine to people. That could be kind of fun. I won't put you on the spot. I'll leave, not to make it awkward for you to have to commit to that or not, but it would be nice if we did something like that. If you want to think about it, it would be kind of cool. Though we're trying to figure out other creative ways we can bring the community together. That obviously lots of people have been doing things like that. But if you or those of you watching have other ideas, if you were part of Propelify, you may have noticed we did some silly things, but that was not just to be silly. It was to try to drive community and make it fun to be a part of what can be it's challenging and it can get stale. And so for the two of you or for any of you watching, we'll certainly welcome creative ideas of how else we can drive more networking among us.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, maybe maple syrup and wine sort of thing. I don't know. Could be fun.
Maple syrup tasting, yeah.
Maple syrup tasting. That's way better than wine, actually. That would be super cool.
So.
Yeah, I like where your head's at.
Yeah, maple syrup tasting. Let's make that happen. I think that would be very cool. So and this is why we do these things. Anyway, really appreciate you both joining us. For those who want to reach out and learn more, where can they do that?
Sure. So they could email us. My email is my first name, Megan.Scharf at international.gc.ca.
Hold on, I'm writing things down here. Meg.Scharf at hopefully I spelled this right, national dot what?
So my first name dot my last name, international.gc.ca. And then Michelle's is the same format.
We're just going to give them yours because no, it's too much. But email Meg or the same format with Michelle. I just wanted to get it on screen, which is why I wanted to write it down. But if you're interested in learning more about Ontario and the Trade Investment Office, hit up Michelle and Meg. Michelle's name is on screen, so you can very easily decode her email address. Thank you both for joining us today. I really appreciate you being part of Tech United and for joining on today's Ask Members Anything. And hopefully we'll see you at another virtual event soon. Maybe a syrup tasting. That would be super cool.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Aaron. We appreciate it.
We should end with our normal, last week, if you were there, you know that every session we ended with a virtual high five. So we can do like a 1, 2, 3, boom, high five. It's fun. Right. You're supposed to join me. It's not as much fun. 1, 2, 3. Okay. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you got it. All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Nice to see you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.